Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Breakdown Podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Ota, and today we're going to be talking about how to build trust in your leadership quickly. And if you've been here for a while, you know that I love acronyms. And I also bring back, anytime I talk about trust, I want to bring it back to the Franklin Covey concept that I learned when I was in corporate. And they talk about the speed of trust. And the basis of the speed of trust is your organization can only grow as quickly as the speed of trust. And, when we're talking about the speed of trust, these three things came to mind, and I'm calling it my TNT framework. Again, if you've been here for any amount of time, you know that I love my acronyms, I love my frameworks. So here we go. And also, TNT for me represents power. You've heard me talk about the power codes, where we're talking about the different leadership styles according to your power codes. And this TNT will just bring it to life. And I mean, sometimes TNT, right? It's meant to be this explosive, like blowing everything up. But if we're looking at, I learned this concept from Dave Ramsey, where he's talking about in your finances, if you have something that is just stuck, what loggers do is they bring dynamite and they blow up the log jam, right? If something's stuck, they're like, okay, I'm just going to blow it up. And yes, I might lose a few logs, but it's going to really speed up my my logs going down the river, essentially, right? Might lose a few, but for the overall gist of the big project, it's going to go a lot smoother. So this is how I look at this TNT framework. So TNT stands for, drum roll, tenacity, neutrality, and transparency. Again, tenacity for me, tenacity for me really um, means that power that we have. Are we consistently showing up with tenacity, with strength? And, when we're thinking about how tenacious are we, like, are we those go getters? Are we that type? And again, we have four different personality types that I always talk about, and the powerhouse is the most tenacious out of all of them. But in reality, tenacity is something innate that is within every natural born leader. Again, this podcast is for natural born leaders or for people who are aspiring to grow into leadership. So I'm talking to everyone at this point, and building trust in your leadership quickly with this TNT framework is going to help you if you're that aspiring leader to really grow into that. So, tenacity, like, how are you on the everyday? Are you showing up consistently? And it's not about, like, am I showing up on social media? It's not that, right? Because I know a lot of business entrepreneurs, people listen to this podcast, but it's in the show up. Are you consistent in how you show up? Are you consistent? Like, hey, I'm Kylie, and this is the way I show up for you. This is the way, like, if you need me as a leader and you call on me, I am there. I have that consistent, like, you can rely on me. So, again, this first one, the tenacity, is that stick to itiveness. Like, I am tenacious enough to, like, I have that inner strength to just keep going. I was talking to a client this week, and we're talking about certain projects that she has going on because she has hired me, as an operations consultant to really look at the efficiency of all her systems and, you know, team, everything, right? Top to bottom, kind of like an operational reset, if you will. And I was looking at something and she's like, I don't know, like, we've tried working on this. And I said, no, I am tenacious. If there is a problem that needs to be solved, I will figure out a way to solve it. And so that is, my consistency. I will keep going and I will persevere until the job is done. And that is really what tenacity means. It's like, do you have that show up quality? Do you have that tenacity to just like, hey, I know I'm having a bad day, but I can still show up. Case in point, this past week, I've been dealing with a parasite cleanse. Let me know if you've ever done one of these and how you felt. If you haven't, it might just like, oh, just a regular detox, regular cleanse. No. Oh gosh. I mean, it is, but it's not. There's a lot of excavation happening. Let's just put it that way. But, I had deadlines. And if you've listened to other podcasts of mine where I talk about burnout, I do talk about, okay, we need to listen to our bodies. We need to really like pay attention to the flow and what we need, listen to our body's needs. And at the same time, we can apply tenacity to this concept in such that, right, even though I may have a parasite, even though I am on a parasite cleanse and I am like 20% capacity, I will give you the 100% of my 20% capacity. So that's what I mean about tenacity. Do you have that? And as a leader who has that, right, you become a stronger leader. And this is also where you build trust as a leader. You can, especially if you are leading a new team and they don't know you. Again, I'm doing this operations consult and they don't know me, but I've established myself as a tenacious leader inside of their organization and like, there's a problem, you know, I'll fix it. So there's that. And I'm not like I'm savior, I'm going to come in and solve all your problems, but because I see problems and I'm like, "Oh, I see this and let's figure out the best solution and make it happen." So I've established my tenacity in that way inside of this organization. So the second one, neutrality. This is talking about emotional resilience, right? Because a lot of times when, stuff hits the fan and we don't operate in neutrality, what ends up happening is we end up being all over the place and trust just erodes so quickly when we are having a meltdown. Not to say that like we're not allowed to have meltdowns, but in the middle of a crisis, what your constituents want is they want a reliable leader. They want someone who's going to be the rock, who's going to be stable. And this happens when you are neutral, right? Let's say you have problems coming up and someone on your team didn't do the job correctly. We'll just put it that way. Maybe it's not up to your standard, and maybe it's like the third, the fifth, the 10th time that you voiced your concern and they still keep getting it wrong, right? How do you show up in that way? Are you like, oh, forget it. Like, I'll just do it myself. And like, do you have a little tantrum? And I mean, it's not that I don't have tantrums. You can ask my husband. I have meltdowns just like everybody else. But at the end of the day, that um that resiliency that I show up to these, like I show up to work, I show up to consult. Like I need to maintain a semblance of neutrality when I'm working with my clients because that establishes trust with them quickly to know that, hey, especially when we go through the VIP day and all, they trust me. They're they're looking to me to be that source for them. Like that sounding board. And I hold it. I'm like, "Yes, this is that and we can, you know, we can handle it." And even if in the moment I don't actually have a solution, it's not that I'm lying per se, but it's that neutrality, like my emotional resiliency is like, I will have an answer for you. eventually. And that's where trust is built. Knowing that you as a leader have everything covered, and knowing that, oh, I can trust her because she's stable, she's resilient, she's not going to go off the deep end. Like, I can bring anything to her and she's not going to go off the deep end. And I'll be honest, it was not always that way for me, but I learned about this concept called personal power versus circumstantial power from one of my mentors. And circumstantial power means I feel like I'm powerful when all the circumstances are correct. And then you have personal power where it's like I can be stable, I can be resilient no matter what the circumstances are, because my resiliency comes from my person. It comes from a personal power that I hold. So circumstantial power means you're giving your resilience away to external circumstances, whereas personal power, it's like you're relying on your in Hawaiian we call it the na'au, the gut, the intuition. You're relying on that part of you to hold the power that you need as a leader. So again, that's neutrality, which is n- emotional resistance. So again, TNT, the third T, transparency. And I know it's going to sound like a conflict of interest or just conflicting with what I just said about neutrality and, maintaining a stoicism when it comes to your emotions. But when we're talking about transparency, it just means being truthful, being authentic with your people, because that's the worst thing is when you have a leader who's wishy-washy and it's like, well, like, even if you're not intuitive, even if you're not empathic, like, people can sense when something is off. When you're like not operating in your full truth, or you're not operating in in that, right? Trust gets eroded so quickly when you don't have a level of transparency. And again, not everything has to be like soul bearing and super vulnerable, super open. Like, of course, there are things that are TMI, especially in a leader constituent, relationship, right? And leaders are not just like, okay, boss leader type of relationships. And we're talking about parent child relationships because as a parent, you are the leader of the home. So it's not like you're going to tell your kid, hey, um, daddy and I are having financial problems. So you might not get that Xbox. I mean, you could if that's something that you've built into that relationship with your child and they have the emotional capacity to hold that. But right, as a leader in the home, as a parent, if my child, like, I don't want to put that on my child, because I mean, I'm talking to leaders here, right? If you have the leadership capacity, if you have that in your DNA, you were probably thrust into leadership from a very early age. And your parents kind of knew that you could hold on to certain things, but that doesn't mean that you wanted to. You know, there were things that you probably could have done without and lived a quote normal childhood. But not all parents, not all leaders have the emotional resilience, neutrality to be, you know, e- es- establish that neutrality, resiliency. So they didn't have the capacity to hold all of their emotions. And it's like, right? Well, then something I forgot to mention in neutrality was how we make decisions in a crisis. I don't know if you've heard this before, but when our emotions are high, the logic is low. And we are not able to make decisions in a crisis if we tap into our emotions. And again, it's going to sound contradictory to transparency when you want to be open, you want to be honest, you want to let people know how you really feel about things. Like, you don't want to keep too much closed. But in the middle of a crisis, right, you have to maintain your emotional stability so that you can make decisions. And it's not just me, it's science. It's been proven in brain science that when emotions are high, logic is low. And it's hard for us to make sound decisions as a leader when our emotions are high. And so going back to the parent analogy, when our parents' emotion was high, I mean, I've been that parent. I've been an emotionally unstable parent, and I have dumped things on my children that they were probably way too young to comprehend and manage. And so, all of that to say, when we're thinking about the entire TNT model, tenacity, neutrality, transparency, all of those factors lead to building trust rather quickly, right? If I show up, right? If I'm just think about it from a parenting perspective. And if you had good parents, then you know, like, oh yes, my parent tenacity. If my parents said they were going to do something, they did it. They had that tenacity to follow through. Right? Check. Good leader, good parent. Oh, yes, my parent was emotionally stable. They established neutrality in our relationship. Oh, check. Good leader, good parent. And then also, I knew that I could trust my parent to be honest and not sugarcoat, not gaslight, not, you know, say the things that really didn't need to be said in the way that it did not need to be said. And again, good leader, good parent. So I always like to bring leadership down to the nuts and bolts of it and how to make it super relatable to everyone in the audience. Because whether you stumbled upon this podcast because a friend sent this to you or just like scrolling the internet and you found it somehow, not everyone is at a different stage of their leadership development. So some of you may be leading giant corporations and you found this podcast. Some of you are in middle management wanting to build up your skills as a leader because maybe you got, a survey that said, hey, we'd like to promote you to your next level, but maybe you should work on some of that leadership development skills. And if they're a good company, they will probably train you. But if you're in a smaller company that doesn't have the budget for it, I'm glad you found the space where you can learn the skills that you need to learn in order to grow yourself in the leadership development department. And if you're not in, one of those leadership quote roles, you still are an effective leader if you resonate with the podcast title, right? We break down leadership principles here, and it's how to lead at work, how you can lead it in the home, how you can lead in every single relationship that you have, and be that leader that you know that you have inside of you, that you know that you're called to be. So, all of that to say, I hope you really enjoyed the TNT framework today. Again, tenacity, neutrality, and transparency as a way to build trust quickly as a leader. So, again, thank you for listening to another episode of the Leadership Breakdown podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Ota, and we'll see you guys again next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Leadership Breakdown podcast. If you're ready to break free from the overwhelm and finally create the impact you've been working so hard for, I want you to grab the Leadership Legacy Playbook. This guide gives you the exact strategies to lead with purpose and leave your mark on the world. Don't keep putting off the legacy that you want to build. Grab the link in the show notes and start building your legacy today.